Hi, my name is Pittsburgh Pat. Welcome everyone to the podcast. I'm here with Shawn Patton from Surprisingly Fun Games. Focus. And I'm covering up his phone number because we did a shot earlier where I messed up and I put his phone number up there. But you can find Shawn at, well, I'll let Shawn introduce himself. Tell the people how to find you.
Yeah, surprisinglyfungames.com is the main website, and we have a few games out right now, but we can talk about those later. But yeah, we incorporated in 2019, so we've been around a little bit.
Cool. Excellent.
Games on the market right now, and another is being worked on.
3 games on the market and 1 more to be worked on, right?
Oh, sorry, two on the market and 1 more.
2 on the market. Oh, okay. Well, why don't we just jump right in, because that's why people are here, probably because I'm going to put the fact you're a game designer in the channel. So I have Tin Spin. That was the one that you described to me in detail at we met each other at the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo. That's how we came to know each other. So not long, we've known each other a month and a couple days. But yeah, I was really intrigued by this. Do you want to tell the folks the elevator pitch for the Tin Spin?
Yeah, absolutely. So why just roll dice when you can spin them? That's the question that Tin Spin asks you. So it's a game where you're not just rolling dice, but you're also spinning them. And in fact, based on all the research that I've done, Board Game Geek, asking folks, I think it's the first game that's ever used dice spinning as a mechanic. So basically, yeah, on your turn, everyone's gonna have their own die, and some dice are better at spinning than others, because it turns out that as the number of sides of a die goes up, the better it is at spinning. And of course, the less number of sides, the better it is at rolling a low number. And so those are the sort of 2 axes that I then crossed to make the balance of the game. And so you have a choice of rolling or spinning, and you're trying to get central golden cubes, and the game sort of goes from there. But at its heart, it's about those 2 axes of design: the luck of the rolling of the die and the skill of being able to spin it longer than the other players.
Well, I gotta say, so Shawn didn't know me from Adam, and I'm at his booth, and he just like takes one of these D20s and just goes like snaps his fingers, and he's got this wonderful like metal dish that's got the perfect concavity, and it just spun forever, and it took me a while, but when we got this game home, my wife and I played it almost immediately. And we were pretty exhausted that day, but we played it the next day, which was Sunday. And it took me a while, but I got pretty good at spinning them. I can't do the finger snap thing, but I'm pretty good at the 2-finger method, the 2-hand method, to get those things going, but not the D4. I can't do the D4 yet.
No, yeah. I've only met about a half a dozen people who can do the D4, and I'm not one of them. If I sort of balance the D4 like a pyramid, and then I can like flick the other side of it, I can get it to spin for a little bit, but of course it goes very far. But yeah, the 2-handed method is really good. You can get more control, and for beginners especially. But I know some people who've been spinning dice a long time that prefer the 2-handed. I prefer the 1-handed. It's like snapping your fingers, but you put a die in between. And there's a little video on the website. If you go to tinspingame.com, there's a little video there that teaches you how to spin. So I've been fairly successful. Basically, if anyone comes over, if they're attracted by the spinning dice at all, I can teach them to spin at least the D12 or the D20 while they're at the table or the booth.
Yeah, I noticed the 12 is really good. I was spinning it. I was teaching kids how to play D&D at this after-school program, and while we were waiting for our turns, and I was saying like, well, this is part of D&D. You're going to wait for your turn. It's going to happen, especially in combat. So I started spinning the dice, and this little 8-year-old took one of the D12s, and he really got it going. Like, it took him a couple tries, but and then they were flying all over the room. But then eventually he got it, and so I may be teaching in a few weeks a course to kids about games, and so Tin Spin's definitely going to come with me. There's no doubt about it. So thank you very much for introducing me to that.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, no, it's the set of dice. So you get 7 dice with Tin Spin, and one of them is the swap die, which tells you how to swap your dice, because you're not always stuck with the same die. The dice are always moving around.
Well, that's only fair, right? Because if somebody's really good at spinning this D20,
yeah,
you
Yeah,
know,
no,
like they're really
part of
good
the
at
balance.
that, then like it's like, okay, let's move along now and let somebody else have a chance.
Yeah,
And so, but like there's one really unique die in here, and it's shaped kind of like a bomb,
the
like an
rocket
old World
die.
War II like bomb.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a rocket die. Yeah, those are cool. I like that a lot. And then you were talking about the switch die, and that's here. It
yep,
says
yep,
pick 10. Nope.
yeah.
Which
I
has
knew that
new. Yeah.
yeah. So it's a six-sided die, and two of the
Mhm.
sides have you swap with the tin. One of the sides has you pass to the left. One of them is pass to the right. One is pick any die you want. And I wanted a side that where nothing would happen, and so like you could write nothing or you could write like no, but I ended up writing the word nope, and it
Mhm.
play tested really well because it's a funny thing for a dice to say to you. You know, it's like nope, like
Yep.
okay,
It's almost like the magic 8 ball,
exactly.
it has that feel to
Yeah,
it.
you roll the
And of
die and you
course,
see what the answer is.
after the movie Nope came out, and now it has this whole new cultural meaning too. It's kind of like a thing. I don't know, but it's totally unrelated. But 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 tell the people, okay, so you were
Yeah,
on a panel, and I went to this panel to watch you and a couple other game designers talk about that process. We may get into that in a little bit, but
yeah.
but you had this you stole the show with your story about these little.
Oh, the golden cubes.
Yes, but you talked about them being brass at first. So I'd
Yeah,
love if you told that story.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the early prototypes of the game, it was sort of you put it together with some dice, and then well there's something that you're trying to gather, right? So in this case, you gather the first to five. First one to gather five is going to be the winner. And so, well, what are you gathering, right? You want it to be something cool that people want. And so, I had a couple different things that I was prototyping, but one of them that sort of stood out was these just shiny, acrylic plastic, right? Shiny plastic cubes, shiny gold. Like, whoa, like these look really cool. Like people want those. And so,
Yeah. Who
yeah,
wouldn't?
it's
Yeah.
nice to have a big pile of gold and you're trying to get some gold. And so
Mhm.
that sort of stuck around as the number one thing. And as I was putting together the Kickstarter for this game. So this was a game I kickstarted in 2022. And I had it in my head. I'm going to tell the full story here, but I
Yeah,
had
go
it in the
ahead.
head that, oh my gosh, what if I had a tier of the Kickstarter where it actually give you real gold cubes? Like how much would that cost? And so I actually priced out like to get 25 10 millimeter gold cubes. It would be this. Basically, I had to have like a $70,000 tier. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous, but maybe that'll get some press. Like, look at this crazy tier of this game. Then I go to make the page, and
Wait, you actually put it on the tier page?
well, I tried to,
Okay.
but Kickstarter is a limit. It has a $10,000
Oh,
limit. You're not allowed
oh.
to charge more than $10,000. And I was like, okay, could I do gold cubes for $10,000? And it turns out if you make them 4 millimeter cubes, right? So normally in the game they're 10 millimeter cubes, right? So they're centimeter. But because of the price of gold and because volume goes up cubically,
Mm.
I would have to make very tiny 4 millimeter gold cubes, which is like kind of ridiculous. Like, but I was still willing to do it. But then I was like, this is bad. And one of my friends pointed out who had run Kickstarters. He's like, well, if someone bids at that tier and then backs out before the campaign ends, you might not fund because there goes $10,000. I was like, ooh, that's a good
Mm.
point. Not to mention that there's only one way to ship gold in the mail. Like you have to jump through all these hoops. So I was like, okay, forget that. What can I do instead? And what's another metal that inherently looks cool? Because like having nice heavy metal cubes, they don't fly off the thing if a dice hits them. There's real, utility to having nice metal cubes. And so I made the collector's edition tier with brass cubes. And so I didn't know how popular this was going to be, but I'd like sourced out a couple places where I could get 10 millimeter brass cubes. And I even went and I bought a vibratory rock tumbler to like polish them up if I needed to. But it turned out I didn't have to do that. But anyway, long story short, it was a pretty popular tier, right? And so I think it was like 1,600 brass cubes or like some large number of brass cubes. And yeah, I had a guy in Turkey. Turns out Turkey is where you want to get brass cubes. And so they
So you
arrived.
you have a brass guy in
I got a
Turkey.
brass cube guy. That's right.
You're the only person I've ever heard say those words, utter those words. That's what I love about that.
if you need brass cubes, I got a guy. Well, and the best part was, so I order like all these brass cubes, like, a couple $1,000s worth of brass cubes, and they get shipped, and it's this huge, ridiculously heavy package. And the person obviously had shipped brass cubes before, because they had basically wrapped the entire cardboard box in packing tape. They knew that the cubes would like break through the cardboard if it was just cardboard. So basically, the box that came was not so much box shaped as it was like morphed itself into this like almost egg shaped thing of like all cardboard and packing tape. But I didn't, they were all there, and so I was very happy with my brass cube guy. And he contacted me like a couple of weeks later. He's like, "Hey, you ready for your next shipment of brass?" I'm like, "No, I don't need any more brass cubes. That was a one-time thing. I'm sorry." But yeah, so
Like Amazon subscribe and save, it's like, wait,
yeah, exactly.
how many batteries am I ever gonna need? Like what we have these.
Yeah, no,
yeah, or whatever it happens to be, like how many jars of Swiss Miss chocolate mix am I going to need? So yeah, but that's great. I love that story because, that's the thing. When you guys were telling your stories on the panel,
yeah,
these were real human like moments. And it was like, we see the finished product, right? I had no idea about the gold tier. And like, it was fascinating to hear about the evolution of the game from concept to finish. And and that's you don't see, it's like I write, so like you don't see the drafts, which is a good thing. You see like the final draft, but like the getting there is like making sausage, it's like you don't want to see it sometimes.
Yeah, no, game design is all about iteration, right? You have an idea, and as soon as you can, you want to make a paper prototype of it, some kind of prototype, just to have first, play it yourself. If you think, okay, maybe I'm going to make these changes, and then you get some friends, some people who know nothing about it, right? The key is to have naive people test it, and that's what we call play testing, right? And so, as game designers, you play test with a couple different groups, you make changes, you play test with new groups. Sometimes you get repeat play testers, but most of the time you want new play testers until you're sort of testing maybe the longevity of the game, or like you've got different modes that you want to play test. But for the most part, you always want fresh eyes on it, because if you've changed something fundamental to the game to make it better, people who have play tested it earlier will know and sort of will go with that. Whereas new people, maybe you've made some things better, but some things worse. And so you need those new folks to keep you honest and to make sure that you're testing the game with fresh eyes every time.
So where do you find them?
Well, events. So for instance, Pittsburgh Gaming Expo has last year I went to Pittsburgh Gaming Expo and I was testing Sweet Deals, because that was the game that I put out this year. And so I just was hanging out in the board game area. There you go. He's got that too. But yeah,
well, you gave me the 2 for deal, so yeah, I couldn't pass it up.
That's right. Only at the conventions you can get the 2 for deal. But yeah, no. So last year at Pittsburgh Gaming Expo, I was testing a very early prototype. It still had my daughter's marker art. When I first, so Sweet Deals was a card game that I put out this year, and both of these are for sale online and in stores. And she had drawn the art on just white dry erase board cards when we were on vacation as a family. And so I had sort of done the initial playtesting with the extended family that we were on vacation with. And so then I took her art, scanned it into the computer, and made a file that I was able to get printed at a print-on-demand website, so I could get an actual deck of cards that could stand up to some play. And I had a couple of those decks made, and that's what I would bring around. And so I would go to board gaming nights, right? I live here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and through Meetup or through various organizations, there's a lot of people playing board games, and you can show up and you can play the game that you made. And you need to be polite and let people know that, hey, this is a game I'm working on. But usually people are very excited to play new games, because it's kind of exciting, right, to be part of that process. And just go into it knowing that Your game's not going to be great at first, and you need these folks to give you their honest feedback. And so I think the biggest hurdle to get over as a designer is to go into the playtest with a very open mind and just let all the feedback wash over you. If you're not careful, you can end up getting defensive. Well, that didn't work because you guys played wrong, or I didn't explain this. Like, you don't want to get defensive, right? These people are doing you a favor by playing your probably unfun game, right? And so you need to just listen, right? You got to be in listening mode. And there's a couple questions you can ask. I always ask. I have a set of sort of standard playtest questions that I always ask. I always ask, what was the most frustrating thing about the game? And the reason you lead with most frustrating is because if this was the real world and people get frustrated with your game, they're going to stop playing it. So it doesn't matter what your game's like, if it's good or bad, whatever. If they get frustrated with something early on, they're not going to play your game. And so I always ask that question first. And then I ask, what was your favorite moment? Because you want to, see what the favorite moments were and hopefully double down on the favorite moments while you're fixing the frustrating moments. And then, I usually ask, what were you doing in the game, to see if it's sort of fulfilling the fantasy of the game. Or another good one is, how would you describe this to a friend? And so, if they're describing your game like that you thought was all about spinning dice, and they're like, yeah, it's like you just roll a die and you get lucky if you get a coin. Right? I'm like, oh, that's not. I want people to say it's a game about spinning dice, right? Like, if that's not the first thing they say, then I'm doing something wrong.
That definitely, it sounds very much like the process when you're writing a book. You get somebody to read it, and then you say, if you give it to your family and they go, oh, that's good, that's nice, and that doesn't help you, right? So like, you need somebody that's going to be brutal. Maybe they can be kind, but they got to be like honest. They got to be like, look, I don't believe the character's motivation in chapter 3. It just doesn't make any sense. And nobody would do that. No guy like irons his jeans before he goes to the club, like nobody in the world does that. It's like that, because I edit people's books, and there was a female author who was writing about this guy that was supposed to be well-dressed and slick, and she's got him ironing his jeans. And I'm like, yeah, guys don't do that. Like almost nobody, like that I've ever met would do that. So just be aware of that, like you can use that still, but you're going to make your character look like a freak, or write it so that that's like a unique property, that he's so into himself that he does that. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
No, yeah, exactly. Be aware of how odd it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you want. Maybe it's not, but yeah.
But exactly. And then the positive stuff, obviously, I mean, you got to hit on that. So, but these gaming nights, like you said, I've been going to one for the last few months, and people are buying stuff, or they're getting Kickstarter prototypes, and they're bringing them in, and they're real excited to explain the rules and everything, and they get defensive because they've invested their money in this prototype, and then when you don't want to play it, it's like, they're like, but why? And it's like, because you just took an hour and a half to explain the rules, and now we have to leave. And so, like, that's not the game I want to play, so.
It is. It's know your audience is another good thing, right? So if you're making a fun game that's meant to be picked up in a couple of minutes and then played for, learn it in 2 minutes, played in 15 type of thing, right? Then you're probably not going to have much luck teaching that to, guys who just sat down to play a 2-hour long game of Agricola, or a 3-hour long game of Terraforming Mars or something, right? So it's
or a multi-session game of like some kind of extraordinary like battle history of China, which is what this one was, and it was crazy. But I like that you actually put on the box like how long it's going to take. Like, it's not focusing, but it says 15 minutes you can play this game. And actually less, depends on how many players you have. And you also have the ages, and you have how many players. And I love that, because like for my class, I may potentially have 8 or 10 students. And so with sweet deals, you can play with 8 players, and that's fantastic,
Yeah, I love so yeah, both Tin Spin and Sweet Deals, right? These are small games,
Mhm.
very flexible, 2 to 6 players, 1 to 8. And yeah, because I like to be able to play games with anyone, anywhere, right? So the best game is the one you have with you to play. And
And that's the other thing, you make them portable. And
yeah,
so you guys were talking about this. It wasn't just you, but there were two other panelists. But you all were talking about weight and distribution and all kinds of things that seem obvious now, but I didn't consider when I walked into that room. And these are all considerations when you're making a game, right? So if you're going to have brass cubes and this thing's going to cost a lot, or weigh a lot, it's going to cost a lot to ship.
oh
So,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, no, exactly. Well, and that's the trap that a lot of folks on Kickstarter can fall into is you can get all excited about these stretch goals and like plussing up the components and making things metal, and like there's just these, right, it's not just the cost of turning something from wood into metal, but it's also, yeah, now it's going to weigh more, it's going to cost more to ship, like everything, it's got these cascading effects. And so what you'll see is you'll see these campaigns that go viral or go huge, and they've promised all these things, and maybe they haven't done their due diligence on them, and so now they're in a position where they risk either losing money or having to go back to the backers to ask for more. And so you really, like, there's a lot of homework involved in doing a Kickstarter. Like, you need to have all your ducks in a row for not just the base game, but any, stretch goals you're going to do. You have to have quotes for all that, because otherwise you can get into trouble pretty quick.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and unfortunately, that also happens with shipping, right? So when the cost of shipping went up like 5 times during the pandemic, there was a
Mhm.
lot of folks who did a 2020 Kickstarter who were just like, they were in a tight spot, right? Like I am very fortunate that I didn't actually, the original year I was going to do my first Kickstarter was 2020,
Mhm.
and I ended up doing it in 2022, and I dodged a huge bullet in that regard because yeah, it's just, if you didn't, yeah, if you didn't do your shipping through BackerKit or something you could charge later when you found out the actual costs, you were just in trouble. Like,
So that's something now that you know. So like if if you're giving somebody advice, okay, we're gonna make something, we're gonna do it on Kickstarter.
yeah,
Be honest and upfront with why shipping is going to be determined later when it's ready to ship.
yeah,
And so, whereas before people were like, it's gonna be $6.95. And then, and then you find out, no, it's gonna cost you $13.95 to ship it. And so there
yeah. I
your
mean,
margin's gone. Yeah.
exactly. No, exactly. You can get into trouble real quick. And like, so that said, now both of my Tin Spin and Sweet Deals, I did do shipping. You paid for it up front,
Mhm.
which is nice from a consumer standpoint, and was a risk I was willing to take because, well, one, because the sort of the cost of shipping things had sort of leveled out, and also because my games are smaller, even if it does go up, it's not going to, it's not going to be an order of magnitude for a game as small as mine. And so I was able to do that, and overall it paid off because it was easier for the folks back in the campaign. And in theory, though, I mean, there's an argument that, when you have backer kit, you can you can upsell people and add-ons and all these other things. And yes, backer kit and the other, the other folks do make it very easy for you to make, to allow your customers to make future purchases, but that also raises the complexity of fulfillment. And so that's also a thing that you have to take into account, right? Like, if you have all these add-ons, you have all these SKUs, right? Every unique item that you're selling is a different SKU, shopkeeping unit, or I don't know. There's some people say it means different things, but
Right.
basically it's like, if you're selling a red T-shirt, that's a SKU. If you're selling a blue T-shirt, that's a SKU. If you're selling
Right.
a large versus a small, that's two different SKUs, right? And so with games, I'm just selling one Tin Spin. Like, I had the collector's edition, but like that was like only in the Kickstarter. If you're gonna buy it in a store, it's always the same SKU. I only have one SKU,
Smart. Keep it simple, right? Especially at the beginning.
especially at the beginning. Exactly.
Yeah. So your idea for tin spin, like the actual origins, like what made you think about spinning dice?
Yeah. So 2022 is when it came out. It was actually 20 years after I first made the first prototype, because I had made it for a class in 2002, where we were supposed to make a game that had dice in it, and I wanted to do something different. And so I thought about spinning dice. I spun quarters,
Yeah.
not competitively, just for fun.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, you can spin dice too. And so then it's well, why? Why am I spinning dice? Well, I want to spin it longer than other people. And so then it became an example, or an exercise in like, how do different dice spin? Like, what are the properties of spinning dice, right?
Mm.
And and so the original game, it didn't have those two perfect axes of luck versus skill. I had a lot more luck in there. In fact, only if you rolled an even number were you given the chance to spin. And so it was like there was a lot more, it was a lot clunkier. The swap die had to have exactly 4 people playing. So you only could play with 4 people. And it was like very rigid and
Mm.
not as fun. And so part of, when I went to revisit it after 20 years of designing video games, I knew a lot more. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like this game could easily support 2 to 6 players if I made these tweaks. And like, I sort of honed in on the axes of luck versus skill, and like tried to find new dice. That's where the rocket die came from. I needed a die that had a reasonable percent chance. So this has a 50% chance of getting a 1, 2, or 3, because it is a D6. It is a 6-sided die. And then I also wanted to make sure, though, that if you practiced, you could spin it for a reasonably long amount of time. So I wanted it to be sort of in the middle, where you got your D20 and your D12. They're really good spinners, harder to roll a 1, 2, or 3. You got your D4, basically impossible to spin, but man, you got a 75% chance of a 1, 2, or 3. So I needed some dice in the middle, and the rocket die perfectly fit that. Yeah.
So you come from you have experience now in video game production, is that correct?
Yeah. My
Or
day
design?
job, as it were, is a
Mhm.
video game designer.
Wow. Well, there's a lot of people that think that would be their dream job.
It is a dream job.
Mhm.
I am very fortunate in that regard. But it's interesting. So I've been in the video game industry 20 years. So there's not a ton that I haven't done. And so board games are, honestly, I play more board games than I play video games.
Mhm.
Maybe that's because I do video games all day at work. I'm not sure, but whatever reason, I was like, oh, this is, I've always loved board games, even, when I was a kid, of course. And it's just such a fun way to connect with people these days. Like, I think people are really craving that, like, personal human connection, analog, whatever you want to call it. And so being able to be a part of that world has been really fulfilling.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's been a swing towards that, like
Yeah.
getting together kind of events. I mean, for myself, I bought Starfield the day it was released, and I don't even know if I have double-digit hours in it yet. And it's but I play D&D every 2 weeks, and and I go to board game night, and my wife and I were learning how to play Mahjong just about 2 months ago. And
Oh, that's an excellent game.
yeah, it's an interesting game, but it's a lot of luck. You have to it seems to me you have to have
Well, there's
a
three
lot of
different rule sets, right?
wild cards.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
the U.S.
Yeah.
rule set, the Chinese
Poker.
rule set, and the Japanese rule set. There's three.
Oh, well, yeah, we're using the US New York rule book. That's the hardest thing for me, is the scoring. It's like, geez, guys, like, and then, takes forever to figure that out. And then they call everything 2 different things. And then, it's a season. No, I can't even remember now. And
Yeah,
then,
sticks and circles and
yeah, yeah. And then they're like, oh, and then, yeah, jokers. So it seemed to me like you get the jokers, you win. So I was like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just Dunning-Kruger. I've only learned this much and I think I know everything. I'm sure it's a much deeper thing than I know,
Yeah.
but I just haven't delved into it. And then my one good buddy, he found out I played chess, and he's been playing chess against computer for like the last 30 years. And so now we meet once a week and play chess. So I'm like, well, I'd much rather like sink my teeth into chess than Mahjong, because I don't know. I've just always been fascinated with chess. So, and he crushes me, but we're both getting better, you know? So yeah, so it's interesting, but yeah, the board game thing. So tell me about the one that you're developing about the museum, right?
Yeah. So this was back in 2013.
Okay.
There's a thing called a game jam, right? So if you're into developing games, video or board game, there are these things called game jams. And so usually they're like a weekend or maybe a day. Usually the video game ones are like at least 48 hours. But we would run in Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh International Game Developers Association, of which I was the president for a while. We would do a board game jam. And so basically you take a day and you make a board game. And you try to do the whole development cycle in one day, right? So it's kind of crazy. But I did that in 2013. And at the time, it was called a day at the museum or a visit to the museum. But the bones were there. And so I worked on it for about the next year. And then I had a child with my wife and had some medical issues. And so I didn't work on it for a while. But when I picked it back up, continued, iterating, bringing it to conferences, bringing it to events. And, it's a fairly slow process, or at least it can be, right? It's interesting. So Mischief at the Museum, I've been working on for about 10 years. Tin Spin, in theory, I'd been working on for 20, although honestly, a large amount of that was just sort of like playing it here and there every once in a while with my friends.
Right.
And then Sweet Deals, my 2023 Kickstarter, that was actually a year. From first prototype to being released into stores was like exactly a year.
Wow.
And,
is that unusually fast?
I think that is unusually fast.
Okay.
I mean, the only way you're going to do that is if you self-publish, because if I shop my idea around to a publisher and we think that could work out, right? They've got their next 2 to 3 years already slated out. So if you're picking up your game now, it's not going to see the light of day for 2 to 3 or 4 years. And so the only way you'd have a year turnaround is if you did a kick. And the interesting thing was, right, I was coming hot off my first Kickstarter, so I had the folks who had backed that now who knew who I was, so it was a little easier to sort of get the next one going. But I also knew I needed to playtest and iterate it, but it came together way faster than it had any right to. And so I was very fortunate in that regard. I think the main thing was I'd been thinking of this game in the back of my head for a long time, and so it just turned out that when it first became a prototype, it was already pretty far along, I guess.
I want to get into that. So this is one of the things I'm interested in is like, okay, so I've been on YouTube since 2016, but I didn't get my first 1,000 subscribers until 2020, and then it became monetized, and then and now we're at like 12,500. So it's you put out this effort, right?
Yeah.
And you may not see results
for
a long time, right? A long time. But it's like you were saying about like having the idea in the back of your head for Sweet Deals, or also approaching a publisher, and they're not going to like really pick up on your idea for years.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, like there's a couple things here. One is it's important to have a couple projects going at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Like it's really important not just to like put all your eggs in one basket and say, I'm going to do YouTube and I'm going to retire. I'm going to quit my job. And there's a very, very low percentage chance that you're going to be able to have a sustainable income in the first year of you doing YouTube. Like that's just not something that happens for a lot of people. Yeah. Probably the same thing with like selling a game, right? So, for anybody that's out there like that says, I feel like I could create a game, or I have this idea for a game. Like, what's a realistic expectation? I mean, I don't want to like deter anybody from doing it, at all. But you also want to like temper it with like, you're pretty much gonna have to have a job for a while, or maybe
Well, and,
forever.
I mean, you're like all like, whew, yeah. So Stonemeyer Games, run by Jamie Stegmaier, like, he had multiple jobs for a long time, right? And now, they've got some of the biggest games out there with Wingspan and other things like that. But like, it's yes, there's sort of, whew, I think if you're doing anything, I want to say if you're doing anything creative, right? There's the sort of you're working at it, you're working at it, and maybe you're seeing some returns, but you're sort of going up with that. And then if you've got your day job, or the job that's basically paying your bills, right? At some point, if you're fortunate and if you've worked really hard, you can sort of ramp down that and ramp up the other one, right? But you need to feel secure in that tipping point, so that you're not in trouble. That's at least my opinion. I don't think to your point of putting all your eggs in one basket, yeah, you don't want to do that. And like my eggs are still mostly in the video game basket, right? Perhaps 3, 4, 5 years from now, I could start doing video games part-time or not at all and focus on board games, but that's certainly not anytime soon. But I do like, it's you just got to keep trying. Like I was speaking to the folks who do parks, and I'm blanking on some of the other games, but oh man, why am I? Anyway, their booth was next to mine at Origins, and I was talking to them, and
Tell everybody what Origins is, though, because they may not know.
What's that?
Tell everybody what Origins
Yes,
is, because they may not know.
Origins is a big board gaming and tabletop role-playing conference over in Columbus, Ohio, that happens every year. And so for the very first time, I had a surprisingly fun booth. My Surprisingly Fun Games booth was there, and I was selling both Tin Spin and Sweet Deals, and it was just eye-opening to go through that whole process and sort of put together the displays and the tablecloths and the banners, and you got to do all that stuff, and that costs money and design time, and graphic design time, and figuring out how you want to do that. But it also is great because you get to talk to other folks who have booths there and learn about them and learn about how they did things. And dozen, I don't know if it was dozens, but it was almost a dozen other games that they had put out before one of them sort of hit it big, right? And that's a very typical story, right? Musicians, writers, game designers, right? You're gonna have a bunch of games that either break even or maybe make a little money or maybe don't make any money, but you're gonna have a lot of those before you have one that makes it big.
It's not, it's all kinds of things. I tried out for Jeopardy at one point, like decade and a half ago. Got called in to like do the play test, the screen test, whatever, take the final exam. We were down at the convention center here in Pittsburgh, and there's a whole bunch of us, and we all do it, and we're all standing around afterwards talking about it, and and people are all excited. They're gonna call me. I know they're gonna call me. And one guy's like, I've been to this stage of it 6 times already, and it's like, so it just deflated everybody's balloon. And so I was in the contestants pool for Jeopardy, never got called, but so it's but it's, you gotta try, right? So you have to try.
Yeah.
But I didn't wait around for 18 months. I didn't quit my job. I didn't sit around thinking, all right, I'm going to be Ken Jennings before Ken Jennings was Ken Jennings. And they only let you win 5 times back then, so you couldn't go on a tear and but it was it's important to try a bunch. I don't know, for me, my philosophy is, and the older I get, the more this is I just try a whole bunch of different stuff, because like the gaming expo. So the gaming, I was on a panel at a gaming expo. Not that many people showed up, but that was like the third time I've even been to a con, right? So I went to Steel City Con in the spring, and then I went to Techo, and then at Techo I met the guy that was running PGX, and we both game at the same gaming store that we all know, Phil's gaming store, right?
Yeah.
We'll give a plug, Game Masters. And Phil will love that. And then yeah, great guy, great place. That's how we bonded. We had a conversation. He said, hey, we need panelists. You want to be on a panel? I'm like, yeah. So, like, how many times in my life am I going to get that opportunity?
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And, now I'm like teaching Dungeons and Dragons to kids and getting paid for it. And like, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know which of of the balls that you have in the air are going to produce something. So
what do they say? They say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So there you go.
Oh, that's a great one.
Classic one, right?
Yeah. Not there was a Japanese anime cartoon called Fooly Cooly. I don't know if you know it. It was on Adult Swim 20 years ago. It's still got a bit of a following. But a very profound saying that the one character says is, nothing happens until you swing the bat. And it was all about baseball. And I was like, that's true. You can let them go by, but eventually you got to swing once in a while. You got to swing.
True enough.
Yeah. So good for you. Well, cool. So we know we can buy Tin Spin online. We're going to put the links there. We know we can buy Sweet Deals online, right?
Yep. tinspingame.com, sweetdealsgame.com.
Is the museum, Mayhem at the Museum, is that a Kickstarter?
Yeah, sorry. So I never really finished answering your question. So yeah, Mischief at the Museum. It is
Mischief at the Museum.
It is probably going to be a 2025, maybe early 2025 Kickstarter.
Oh, so it's okay.
I'm taking a year off.
Gotcha.
Kickstarter. Honestly, because they're a lot of work, and doing 2 back-to-back years was like, oh my gosh. But also because honestly, I need to work on the marketing a little bit to get Sweet Deals and Tin Spin out there. And so basically I'm focusing this year mainly on marketing those 2 games. And then Mischief at the Museum, I also the art for that game. So that's a larger game. So Sweet Deals and Tin Spin are both about 15 minutes total. You can play around in 15 minutes. Mischief at the Museum is about 15 minutes per player, right? So if you're playing with 4 players, it's going to take an hour. And there's a lot more pieces. There's a lot more art. All the balancing. So it's a more complicated game. It is still very approachable because, again, I like to make gateway games. I have a lot of friends and family who are maybe not hardcore board gamers. I also have some hardcore board game friends, and so I like to make games that, in theory, it can bring them together. And the way I do that is I like to design approachable games with hidden strategies. So if you care about the hidden strategies and you're focused on those, you can play the game better, or you can just have a good time, right?
It's on the back of your business card.
Hidden strategies. Yep, that's my slogan right
there. I love that slogan.
So yeah, Mischief at the Museum. Hopefully, I just got in touch with a new artist who I think will add some vibrancy into the art that I think was lacking maybe from the first couple passes. And so hopefully that'll go well. And yeah, but in the meantime, I continue to bring it around to conventions. And so, yeah, if you go to surprisinglyfungames.com, you can get on my mailing list. And that is what I use to do playtests, because I've ported all my games, well, not Tin Spin, but Sweet Deals and Mischief at the Museum. I have digital versions, so you can play them on Tabletopia or Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator. And so I sometimes do playtesting online. And so if you get on the mailing list, that's a great way to find out about testing.
That sounds good. Well, I'm definitely going to do that. So we'll put all that information in the description box for everybody who's been watching.
Thank you so much.
And that'll be that'll be great. Well, it's been great to talk to you.
Yeah.
It was great to talk to you in person. I'm glad we had this hour almost to talk again. great guy and love supporting your stuff. And you got a great product. And
No.
you even have your own like bags. I still have a
The
bag.
surprisingly fun bag.
Yes, I
Yeah,
still have one.
so when I was doing the booth at Origins, I was like, oh, I
Mhm.
gotta have bags to give to people, right?
Mhm.
And like, what would be funny? So I actually, yeah, turns out there's websites where you can give them a file and they will make you a custom stamp. And
Mhm.
so I had a surprisingly fun bag stamp made, and my daughter and I sat there and stamped a bunch of bags.
Well, it's funny you mention that because I just got this. Whoop. Sorry, guys, you had to look at my tie or my shirt. This custom print stamp thing because when I went to PGX,
Yeah.
I was dressed in that crazy suit back there as Benny from Fallout New Vegas, which is set in a post-apocalyptic Vegas with casinos. So as a business card, I took playing cards and I just wrote Pittsburgh Pat on YouTube on the playing cards and passed them out at the convention. And that took a long time. So I thought, well, okay, I'll get a stamp. So finally, I was at Staples. I was taking something back from Amazon. They gave me like, I don't know, 30% off or something. I'm like, I'm buying one of these rubber stamps. And I'm just going to use that
Yeah.
the next time I go to a convention, right? So
I love it.
make my own business cards. So
yeah, I started, you lean in, surprisingly fun booth, surprisingly fun bag. When people see that bag, it's just,
Mhm.
they know what I'm all about. Like, I'm the guy who's just, I'm going to lean into the joke, right? And just like,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a good time.
Oh yeah, and it was darling to like your whole family was involved. Your daughter actually, my wife used her card and gave your daughter and she's like, and you were trying to tell your wife how to use Square, I think it was, and
Yeah.
then your daughter's like, I'll do it, and she just went because kids
Kids, man,
they interface with electronics better than we
you
do.
can use the iPad and the computer better than anyone. It's kind of fascinating.
Absolutely. All right. Was there anything you want to say before we go?
No, I just really appreciate talking to you. It's a good time.
All right, great. Well, I hope everybody out there had a good time too, and we'll see you on the next one. And I'm going to
Alrighty.
end now.